All right. Welcome to the IAG Thursday thing. This thing that we do every Thursday where we all hang out. Sometimes we have cool guests on. Sometimes we just talk about news, but usually we have a pretty good time. This time, though, we actually have a guest. I'm pretty stoked about this. This is one I've wanted to do for a while. Get a lot of braking questions about brakes, whether it's street-oriented stuff, track-oriented stuff, whatever. And I gotta be real, I would be lying if I said I was a massive brake expert. I know what works for me, but there's a lot that goes into this. So now is your chance to ask questions to an actual brake expert. We have Preston from EBC Brakes on today, and he's going to try to answer a bunch of our questions. I do want to start out. I want to chat with Preston a little bit. Let's hear some of his background, see what he's up to, and kind of how he got into what he does, just so we know, he's not bullshitting us. And let's chat with Preston for a bit, and then let's get right into some questions. So let's start from the top. Preston, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here. I think this is gonna be fun.
I think it'll be a good time, dude. So, you work for EBC. I actually met you at PRI 2 years ago, I think is what it was. Almost 2 years at this point. And I met you in the booth over at PRI, and you were talking about a new brake compound that EBC was working with. And we decided to test it out, and I ran some on my BRZ, fell in love with it, and now we run them on Boogie, and I run them on a bunch of buddies' cars, and they're basically my favorite pads on the market. But what do you do at EBC?
So I've been with EBC for almost a decade now. I think 9 years in various capacities. Right now, I am the R&D manager, so I oversee centered friction technology development. So I see, I do anything from formulation to dynamometer testing. I do field testing.
So when you talk about dynamometer, that word that I'm not even going to try to say again because I'm going to sound stupid, we are talking about like the picture that was in the preview for this, which is you're basically like stress testing brakes, like your resistance testing. What would you call that? Dynamometer.
Yeah, we call it inertia testing. So
okay.
I should be more clear. It's a brake dynamometer. It's not a full scale car dynamometer. Yeah. So essentially, what it does, it has a large horsepower electric motor, spins a bunch of discs that are, probably 4 feet in diameter, and the motor releases. Our caliper on the other end grabs onto the rotor and slows it down just like it would on a vehicle. So it's just isolated to just the friction material because that's all we're really looking at when we develop.
Sure. Okay. So you use that. That's one of your major tools for developing these things then, right?
Yeah, it's much cheaper to do it on there and then schedule track days and things like that. And we can make little tweaks and, you can set something up in the morning, leave, and the next morning you come in, you've got results on whether your, formulation worked or not.
Cool.
Kind of so, gives you a smack in the face right away if you're wrong, but
didn't mean to cut you off there because yeah, that was one of those things I just wanted to make sure people understood. So going back into this, you're in the R&D department. Essentially, you're overseeing R&D. So you are going into a lot of the friction materials and the actual product itself. This isn't just something in fact, you're not a sales guy. As far as I understand, that's not what you do. You're actually in the science side of this.
Yeah, I'm very far away from a salesperson. My background's all technical, so my background is all engineering. So I went to school for material science and engineering at Carbondale in Illinois, which is how I got into this. It's one of the only schools that we actually had brake dynamometers and a friction science department in-house. So I kind of went through that and ended up that, the guy I worked under did my thesis, knew the owner of this company, and it just kind of serendipity. So I actually got to do something I was passionate about, which lucky to be able to do.
Yeah, not very many people get to do that. That's epic.
Yeah, worked out really well.
So you legitimately went to school for what you actually do, Carbondale. I know that's actually kind of funny that he became a brake. I think that's funny that you became a brake engineer out of. I don't know. I don't know why I find that funny, but Carbondale's actually not too far away from where I was in Illinois, if I remember right. But either way, sweet. So your background is not in sales. It's more in the science side of this, and this is one of the biggest reasons I wanted to have you on. One of the things I've always liked talking to you about, because you're never trying to sell me something. It's just more about the science of it. Recently, you guys released a line of brake pads, the SR pad. That's what I've been running. I guess that was something new to you guys. You were doing a different type of material. I've fallen in love with these things. I love them. But I guess what goes into developing a brake pad specifically, as far as like materials? What do you for let's say a track application, which the SRs are, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to balance wear or just bite? Like what? I know I'm asking these questions really broadly, but from a material perspective, like how do you find that balance? Do you know, if you can kind of elaborate somewhat on that, even if it's really high level, it'd be cool.
Sure, that's kind of the black art of it, right? Because there's so many different things to look at when you're doing this, because the dynamometer spits out so much different data for you. It'll spit out how the pad is actually reacting throughout an engagement. So that's something we look at, and brake pads, I've had people come up and say, why are your pads better than these or those? It's not better, it's different, right? Better is a controversial word because brake pads are really subjective. I mean, some people like a lot of bite in the beginning and it tapers off. Some people like the opposite. They like to push the pedal really hard and really try to control it. So we look at all that, and it depends on what market we're going for. So when we developed these pads, ironically, they were actually aimed at like your IMSA, GT cars, kind of thing. So again, I'm sintered technology, so that's a sintered metal one. So then there's which is the SR series, and there's another line that was aimed at more track days, things like that. Mm-hmm. So we were going full race. So we went high initial bite, which you apparently and a lot of the hardcore race guys really like. High mu. You're on real sticky tires, so that's something.
When you say mu, like explain mu real quick.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's essentially how good the pad is at turning your brake pedal input and pressure into stopping power. So
almost like bite's probably not exactly the word, but maybe like how much the brake material will dig into the rotor. Would that be a good way of explaining that, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. So that's, coefficient. Yeah, when we talk about bite is defined as kind of like the rate at which that coefficient comes in. So like high bite would be, say it's a 0.55 coefficient material, which is a little high for a car. That's right when you touch the pedal, it's there. That would be high bite, and then it might taper off or stay up like that. So it's how quickly that coefficient comes in is bite.
Okay. So I guess depending on what material you're using, you're going to get different rates of mu with that then.
Exactly.
And it's really just mixing it and making sure to get the desired result you're after.
Yeah, so you make little tweaks here and there, and we are balancing wear, of course. Someone wants to replace their pads, every track day if they can. Net thermal conductivity, that's a big thing we'll probably talk about later with shims.
Yep.
So much that goes into it. But those are the main things, really. Coefficient, bite, wear. And, well, I guess a big one really is the temperature range we're aiming for.
Yep.
So we got to make sure it operates. People keep paging my phone. Making sure it operates in the temperature range it's meant for. So GT cars, this was aimed to be rotor temperature is around 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot. I mean, that's glowing whole time.
Yep.
So that's the other thing you're looking for.
So you get I'm wondering if that's why like the time attack guys really dig this. I really like these pads because they bite. Their initial bite's kind of ridiculous. Boogie's really rough on brakes. I could probably run a bigger rotor and a bigger caliper, and that's something we're going to get into here in a second too. Because only one part of this equation is actually the pad, and there's other parts of this equation, but the pad is kind of like a tire in a car. It's the thing actually making contact. So there's a lot that goes into that. I'm sure.
Faz's point, real quick. Yes, 1200 isn't uncommon in time.
Yeah,
things like that. The big difference is, do you go out and you'll do 2 or 3 laps?
That's it. Yep.
Maybe, and then when you're looking at GT cars and things like that, your hour, 2-hour long race, so they'll be at that temperature for a long time. And to your point, I think that's why it works so well on time attack, because it was designed for that temperature range. You should get more life out of it because it's, I don't want to call it endurance because that word's thrown around a lot, but it is aimed towards, longer races. So it works pretty well. And the centered materials are kind of nice because they don't really care what temperature range they're in usually. Just the chemistry of them, which we can talk later on if you want, and how they work. They have a really wide operating range from cold, driving around in the paddock, all the way up to their, ceiling.
So when you say centered, let's elaborate on that a little bit. What are we talking about?
Okay, so probably easier to start with. So there's a few different types of pads. There's something called, people refer to NAOs, which are non-asbestos organics. Those are your typical like car pads, passenger vehicle.
Okay, I gotta ask. When somebody says organic, are we talking essentially smashed up grass clippings? I mean, that's what they look like.
A lot of carbon. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's just very carbon loaded, and it's all held together with glue. There's some metals and sand and stuff in there, but yeah, mostly carbon.
Okay, that's so smashed up grass clippings and sand. That's what grandma's pads are.
Yep. Pixie dust and hopes and dreams. And then step up from that would be what they call semi-metallics. It just, you go over a certain amount of metal in the pad, which is what a lot of European cars will come with because they're a little more aggressive Autobahn type pads. That would be also like your race pads are considered semi-metallics. Most of them are.
Yeah.
A lot of our competitors, that's what they use. Centered's pretty rare. And then, so we'll jump, there's ceramic and some other things, but they're all pretty much the same thing with marketing. And then you go up to the centered materials, which is actually, we take metal powder, compress it, varying different metals. It could be copper or tin, a bunch of different things that we're going to use. And we press it in a really high tonnage powdered metal press. And we'll put it in, after that, we'll bond it to the back plate in a furnace that goes up to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, where your typical pads are made at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for like the semi-mets.
Okay.
They're metal, essentially.
Yeah.
They're 60% or so metal, usually.
Okay.
Really
and depending on so the percentages of the type of material you're using. So say you're using, like, one's got more copper, one's got more tin, whatever it may be, iron, I don't know. Whatever you're using in there, that's going to change the feel of the pad, how it would wear, and how it would how it would work against your steel rotor or whatever. Then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Metals make a big impact on how much temperature it could take, and then there's things we call abrasives in it, and counterintuitive, but there are lubricants in it, things that stop it from trying to weld to the rotor, essentially, and that's what protects.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually kind of what I was going to ask. Like, why wouldn't you just stick a just a raw hunk of metal on there and slam the brakes. I mean, what stops you from doing that?
Yeah, that's the thing that a lot of people complain they warping rotors, things
Sure.
like that. I mean, you think of the makeup of a rotor. It's what, 32 millimeters thick, usually cast iron. I mean, it's a very hard thing to move. Essentially, what's actually happening when you get judder, usually, or that vibration, you think it's warped rotors, is that your material is welded to the rotor, and then the pad's skipping across that, so it feels like your car is shaking. So that's why a lot of companies, they'll recommend, us included, go out and do some hard stops, clean up your rotor, and usually that vibration goes away. So that's what the lubricants do. They stop that from happening. And yeah, you could do a metal puck, but you would probably have more metal on the rotor than you would on the pad. Not too much time.
Yeah. So, one of the problems, and then you go back to the other side of this. Why wouldn't you just run a race pad on your street car all the time? And this is something I run into all the time too. People are like, man, these pads, Dewey loves them. He can stop Boogeyman with crazy amounts of horsepower. He loves the bite and everything. I'm going to run these on my daily driver. Why wouldn't you do that? And I guess if you could elaborate on why you wouldn't want to do that, outside of dust and squeaking.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We've actually had someone call in and ask for SR for their Honda minivan. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Because that goes back to, the temperature range we're aiming for. So those lubricants, they kind of, let's call it an activation temperature, where they come in and they actually start doing something. And if you never reach that range, you're going to end up with some of that welding. You're going to end up with a lot of squeal because it's just metal on metal constantly with no type of lubrication in there. On a brake pad, you kind of want wet sanding. You don't want dry sanding. That hurts rotors, that wears pads, So putting it on there, it'd probably feel great for a little while. Ironically enough, actually, my boss has SR on his F-150 because he wanted to see how it would feel. He said, "Stop's great, but oh my god, he sounds like a school bus." You can hear it. And they don't wear. I mean, there's some drawbacks to it, and you can do it, but I highly do not recommend it. Plus, a lot of people aren't used to that much coefficient, and some people in panic stops, your ABS might not be able to keep up with it.
You'll throw it into ice mode. I've done that. My beards, it's kind of common with all-wheel drive Subarus, because I got to be real, all-wheel drive Subarus have shit ABS, but BRZs do not. BRZs have really good ABS, and I've managed to get on the street, managed to get my BRZ to go into ice mode before. On flat ground. I was really surprised. Shouldn't have been driving with those pads on the street, but things happen.
Yeah, I feel you. I have a Corvette, and that's what I track. And I have, those are notorious for ice mode too, and it's pretty terrifying. You just get nothing.
Yeah, it's you're just hitting the brakes. It's rock solid, but you ain't stopping. Ice mode's awful. So Spaz actually brought something up, and I don't think he's using the right word either, but I'm gonna just kind of pop this out here. He's like, it's probably the wrong word, but how caustic is the dust from a sintered pad? I'm having flashbacks from DTC 70 dust insta-rusting to my Volks, hearing the description of manufacturing. So what would happen, and I know what he's talking about, is some of the more aggressive Hawk pads and other brands, but Hawks for some reason tended to be pretty bad about this. The dust, if it got any amount of moisture on it at all, it would turn into like cement, and you were never getting it off those wheels again. So I guess, we're talking about a centered pad again. Is it any better or worse for that? I'm assuming you're probably going to want people to clean the dust off as fast as possible, no matter what.
Sure. And, that was one of my concerns, because I don't like my wheels getting destroyed either. So I was keeping a close eye on that. And I'm one of the laziest people for keeping my car clean. It's hard enough keeping it on track, And I haven't had any issues with that. I mean, I've had dust all over mine. And another thing is they don't wear, like their wear rate's pretty low compared to a lot of things we've seen. So you don't generate that much dust.
Yeah.
Looking at this picture.
That's Josh. I think he was just cruising around on the street during his break-in. That's where that stuff came from.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
I hope surprisingly enough, and it's kind of counterintuitive with how metallic they are, because I would have thought, there's things like iron and stuff in them that would get on your wheels and rust. But this is something I've seen people talk about a lot, and I'm not sure, because honestly, I don't do semi-metallics, what is actually causing that. But
yeah,
haven't had a problem with it. But
so some of that I'm thinking has to do with well, let's get into this again then. One of the if you're not getting the pads to the temp they need to be at, then you start running into, like you said, that over abrasion issue where stuff starts trying to weld. The lubrication side of the pad no longer is functioning correctly because they're not to a correct temperature. I actually think that's one of the things that may be happening with one of the other drivers who have been running around with your pads is he's not actually getting them to the proper temperature, hence why he's kind of zipping through them a little quicker than we were actually expecting. Is there anything you could do in a situation to where maybe you've got a really nice set of brakes with some big calipers and some big rotors and like heat dissipation, but you might not be getting them up to temperature enough? Is there a way you can like tune for that?
The only thing you could really do is do some vent blocking, try to get less air to them so they do get hotter. Or I don't know who exactly you're referring to, but there is a compound down from what you use now that goes a little lower in temperature range.
So I think what I was trying to get at here was one of the complaints people have that happened on my wall the other day were EBC just released titanium backing plates. And one of the things those plates do is essentially give there's like a heat barrier between your caliper and the pad, but the downside to that it'd probably put more heat into the pad.
Oh, sure. That's a fair point. You're trying to give me a segue and I dropped it.
Yep.
Yeah, the titanium shims help with that. It's not hugely significant
it's not going to be a silver bullet by any means.
No, it could help though. And even the shims, if you're having like noise issues and you're trying to drive, say, SR11 around on the street, the shims help. Any decoupling of that pad from the piston helps. Sure. A lot.
Well, I mean, it's a metal thing that's rubbing up against another metal thing. If you were to have anything in there to separate that, it would probably help.
Exactly.
So, all right. I kind of want to get into some brake. We've went over pads a decent amount, at least on the track side. So, let's actually talk about some street side stuff then. Is there such thing as a do everything pad? Is there a pad that you can drive around with no dust on the street? It's going to stop immediately, and then you can take it to the track and have everything.
No.
Okay.
There was, man. But yeah, there's you're going to sacrifice something, be it because of that lubrication thing we talked about, or some kind of heat resistance. You're going to get squeals. I know, actually, I just was watching this, and I don't know if you've seen it. Grassroots Motorsports is doing a thing on if they can find a pad like that, and they cannot.
It doesn't really exist. The closest thing I've ever found was actually, and this is not trying to jerk off EBC more than we already are, but I had decent luck with EBC yellows on light track use and street use, but they tended to wear fairly quick, especially being driven around on the street, and they definitely weren't a track pad. They were kind of this in between that you could kind of get away with it.
Yeah, that's the next thing I was going to say. It depends on your vehicle too. I mean, if you've got
by all means,
some crazy 600 horsepower, 3,800 pound vehicle, no, there is no intermediate pad for you. If you are driving a Miata that you keep relatively stock and you do track days, yeah, something like yellow is great for it. You're probably not going to pound through them.
So that's one of the advantages to say, a lot of people in here are a little new to this, and we tend to veer more towards track stuff, but I want to make sure that we're talking about street stuff too. This is one of the advantages to a lighter weight vehicle like a BRZ or something like that, is it kind of opens up options that way. If you have an all-wheel drive Subaru, which tends to be heavy, you're looking at the 3,400 pound mark for pretty much all of them, and it's really front heavy. You're going to have a very hard time finding a do everything pad, and you're going to have to swap out.
Yeah, 100%. Very vehicle dependent.
Yep. Extremely vehicle dependent, and it's even tire dependent to a point if you really think about it, because if you're running like one of those Super 200 treadwear tires versus like a 400 treadwear tire, that the tire is not able to slow the car, so it's not putting that into the brakes. Yep.
Definitely. And that's a problem we see a lot. It's the same thing with people trying to daily, like something like SR. You cannot or should not put something like SR on something where you are running like a 400 treadwear tire. Your ABS is going to lose its mind. You just don't have it there.
Like I said, I had SRs on my BRZ, and I ended up setting off ice mode, and what really wasn't a crazy panic stop. I put my foot into it like it would have been a panic stop, and I ended up overstepping it. And it's just because they were ice cold when I did it. One of the reasons I'm just not a fan of running track pads on the street at all. So now let's get into some of these misconceptions. Because this is, again, pads are only one situation, but you could have, an undersized brake system, and there's not a pad on the planet that can save you. And on the flip side of things, I guess let's kind of go through this. How important is it to have many extremely, I don't know, why would you want more pistons inside of your brake caliper? Because there is a massive misconception out there of more piston means more stop, when that's not exactly true in any way.
Oh, yeah, it all depends on piston size. It's really for pressure distribution. And that's why you'll see a lot of them, like the 3, even 2 piston ones like we make. Or sorry, we're used to referring to per side, a 4 piston or a 6 piston.
Yep.
Typically, your leading edge, so the part that the rotor is actually entering into the caliper, does more work than the trailing edge, so where it's exiting. So you'll see the pistons are staggered to make up for that. So you'll have a smaller piston on the trailing edge, and if you don't do something like this, you'll get really bad pad taper.
Yep.
So that's a big thing on it. And usually, you with going to race or something like that, you just have a bigger pad. So you can't just have a giant piston, right? You'll end up trying to put too much pressure through that one piston. You'll warp back plates, uneven wear. Just it's a lot of benefits to multiple pistons, but mainly it's pressure distribution is the big thing.
So, is there a downside for putting a larger rotor on the car if you were to just go bigger and bigger?
I mean, you're fighting weight at that point,
sure.
Right? On-sprung weight is never good. And every time you increase the diameter of the rotor, you are proportionally increasing essentially the stopping power you're going to get out of it. So if you go from a 300 millimeter to a 330 millimeter, you're getting 10% more torque out of it. So you might have to downgrade your pad coefficient. But there's not too many downsides to it besides like wheel clearance. Usually going as big as you can and are comfortable with, and fitting your wheel and your rules allow, is usually good as long as you balance it with the rear.
Sure.
And so there's really no downside to it, except you get the diminishing returns eventually, right? With that larger rotor, you're getting less temperature into the whole system. So you might not hit your operating range anymore. It might start becoming a hair trigger, pedal. So it is a balance.
So, drilled or slotted?
Definitely not drilled.
Why is that?
Drilled was kind of an old school solution to trying to get, okay, so when we talked about the semi-metallic pads,
yep,
they tend to, they're made out of resin, glue, and that glue is only cured at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly. Manufacturer may vary. There's some post-processing that can help with it, but it off gases. And it used to really bad. And that's essentially what fade is. So if you don't get that gas out from in between the pad and the rotor surface, you're kind of gliding on a cushion. So that's where your brakes will get stinky and you lose that coefficient. So they did the holes to try to get that gas to escape. It was a nice little lightning thing for some people. But overall, it tends to create all those little holes or stress points. So you'll start to see cracks migrating in between the holes. And you're decreasing your surface area that's actually contacting. So you're asking more of the pad. Your pad's probably going to wear faster. And slotted is nice. It kind of does the same thing as a drilled without the issue of potentially cracking. And it also helps cleave the pad if it does glaze. But it can wear your pads faster. I mean, it's machining it, right?
Yeah.
So
because you're constantly like basically cutting the surface when those go by.
Exactly. And slotting works in a lot of scenarios, but SR isn't made with any glue or anything like that. So I usually like to tell people use blank rotors if you can. Use ones without slots, anything like that. All you're doing is wearing the pad faster. But no one uses, I mean, any BBK you get is going to be some kind of, slotted rotor or something like that. So it's a hard request, but
sure.
But slot is definitely the way to go if you're trying to decide.
Where did I want to go from there? I had a good one for you. I'm trying to. Man, it's killing me. I got a question in the chat. Randy from IAG, he's actually one of our guys. He's got a really nice GC. It's sort of related. Any suggestions for upgrading brakes on tow vehicles?
Those are a difficult one too, because I have a F350 that I tow, our 10,000 pound trailer with, and that one's kind of a trade off. It's kind of the same thought of race pads. They're
sure.
Get hot. I mean, it's funny if you look back on a lot of, even ours back in the day. The race pad was the truck pad because they're kind of in the same environment. They're getting really hot.
Isn't that what a blue or an orange is?
Yeah. So now there's a new. It's like now it's color coded red, but it's not like the red ceramic. It's a upgraded heavy duty truck pad. So that's a good one. That's what I have on my truck now, and I like brakes with a lot of bite. So usually just a pad upgrade and good fluid is what you need in tow vehicles now. I mean, you look at the size of the calipers and rotors they put out on. They're pretty massive.
Yeah, they kind of stopped playing around. It ain't the 90s anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you're going down 76 or something to VIR. You need brakes.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yeah, what Randy said, he's gonna check out the reds, but yeah, reds are. I want to say it was the orange is what I threw on my. I have a 2011 F-150 that I towed my 10,000 pound trailer with for a while, which was just a terrible idea and had a real butt pucker moment at one point. And so I decided to throw some rowdier pads at it, and that's actually what I got. And this was way before I did anything with EBC. I was still using EBC. I got a kit with oranges in it, and that setup worked good. I just approached it like I did race brakes, because that's what essentially was happening, was I was overheating my brakes. So
yeah, and you may give up some things. I know mine squeal every once in a while in certain circumstances, but
yeah,
and it's the trade-off.
Yep, that's what it is, because there's no, like you said, there's no better or worse brake. Okay, it's not like ours are better, yours are better. It's more, what are you willing to trade to get in the area that you want?
Exactly. And how do you want it to feel? And maybe this manufacturer does this feel better for you, or it works on this car different for you. It's
so let's kind of skip back to that then. That's actually a good thought. I'm a huge fan of massive initial bite. I need to be able to modulate the pedal a little bit. And I'm talking about boogie. Okay, so I like a lot of initial bite, but I don't want it to happen the second I breathe on the pedal. I need to have to dig for it a little bit. And to me, that ends up feeling just about perfect. And then I get the bite I'm looking for, and obviously I need it to be able to perform in the temps that I'm putting it in. I think I just I'm telling you, man, something's wrong with my brain today.
Well, that's a common thing.
But here's where I was going with that. Not all cars work well like that, especially if like that massive initial bite. If you don't have ABS, that can be terrifying. You could lock the tires up. You can. So, I guess, going back to one pad, like if what works for me might not necessarily work for somebody's Miata or even their BRZ. And this is kind of why I wanted to have you on and not a sales guy on, because you said the perfect thing right out of the gate that's made all of this stupid. Now I was going to try to wrap around back to this, but you said it so fast. There really isn't one pad to rule them all. It's finding the setup that works.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty common. I mean, having a huge amount of initial bite in some cars, you immediately upset the car.
Yep.
You know, and there's other factors in that. Like you see big differences between European cars. They tend to be very over servoed, so a lot of brake assist.
Sure.
So that initial bite can catch you off guard because the pedal doesn't feel like it's really doing much, but it's doing a lot. Yeah, so there is no magic or silver bullet, like you said. And high initial bite is really nice on cars that have a lot of aero because they can take it right in the beginning.
Yep.
Yours does. But you do that on something that doesn't have the setup like yours does, and it's probably going unstable. The rear is going to start dancing around. And it's just too much weight transfer too fast to the front for the car.
Yeah. Let's talk like a spec Miata or something like that. The last thing they're going to want is a bunch of initial bite. They have no aero. Those cars are all based on balance and momentum. Like now I haven't personally driven a spec Miata, but let's take a Sunday Cup car. The last thing they'd want is something that you just touch the brake with your toe and it, you come hauling down when all they want to do is shed a few mile an hour for a corner.
Yeah, 100%. So I do some endurance racing with AER, and so we have it's kind of a unique experience because we got 4 or 5 drivers, and in that scenario, you need to find a brake system that works for all 5, and that they like. So we actually had a spec Miata driver. He's kind of the hot shoe that comes in every once in a while, and it took him a lot of getting used to the SR bite because he kept scrubbing too much speed.
Sure.
Yeah, it's all driver preference, and like you said, that was good. Yeah, like a Sunday Cup, that's all momentum, right?
Yeah.
So if you touch the brake and you scrub off 20 miles an hour and you meant to scrub just 5 or plant the nose, yeah, you're in trouble.
Yep. So again, finding that balance really matters, and being able to make sure you can get the brakes into the operating temperature they need to. So let's take a step back one more time. I've been talking about track stuff. It's actually fairly easy for me to get a ton of heat into my car. Let's talk about Drew. Okay. Drew Hackett, who was on last week, and he's in the chat right now. Drew does high level autocross. Yeah, he's got some big tires, but there's still 200 tread wear. Oh, actually, no, he runs Hoosiers. But either way, he's got big tires and whatever, but he's not able to do lap after lap after lap or have long laps, with really long brake zones to get tons of heat into him. It might not behoove him to be running, the same thing that say like Boogie would be or whatever. Actually, he's like, hey, give me that initial bite, which by all means, but maybe Drew's probably not the best example, but somebody doing some high level autocross, maybe they can't get the brakes up to temp and they're not going to work as well.
Exactly. The nice thing about, I think we talked a little earlier, the centered materials is they have a really wide envelope of where they operate in.
Yep.
So they actually fit really well in autocross. As long as your car is, has the mechanical grip and to run them, like the SR11, the step down from what you run, is really good for cold bite. I mean, it's on the dynos, our temperature range that we test at is anywhere from ambient to God, I think 1800 degrees Fahrenheit is what we usually run them up to. And SR does not have a huge delta between that ambient and 1800. If anything, it settles down a little bit as it heats up.
Yeah.
It's actually a good use for that, because there's no glue in it. There's no chemical changes that happen, anything like that you need to elicit to get the coefficient out of it.
So that'd be an advantage to a sintered material then. So a non-sintered material, you may have to get into a particular temp before they do anything.
Correct. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. I mean, autocross, the double-edged sword with that, right? Because your tires are cold. So, and if you have all that bite right in the beginning, that may not play well, but maybe on your, you come back and you get to go again. And some of those, real fast autocross days, it can be good.
Yep. Well, I mean, guys like Drew, they're running the really, really sticky instant sticky Hoosiers. So yeah, that might actually work out for him.
Yeah, Drew, that would. Yeah, saying.
Yeah, we might have to have a conversation with Drew.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe we'll talk to Drew outside of this, because he's my autocross expert. So Spaz, Dewey with a constant feel across the temp range. Would you say in regards it feels similar to the bite profile of PFC01 takeoffs you borrowed from me? Actually, Spaz, and again, we don't have a sales guy on here, but the biggest reason that I really like these SR21s is because they feel like PFC01s. And I can't think of that is the highest compliment I could possibly give them.
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear that. I mean, I know PFC01, I've ran them before. They're for a long time, and they're kind of a gold standard for brake pads. They're
so good. And that's what these feel like. For me too. So this is why you hear a lot of people compare a lot of different brands of brake pads, and what works for them, and so you've got to take maybe what you're trying to look for and hear feedback, and that's what you shoot at. But brake pads aren't cheap. Okay. So it ain't like you can just keep throwing $400 at a set of brake pads till you find something you like, but so you do your best, you do your research, but it's really hard to nail it down. But the PFC01s felt like DTC 60s from Hawk, which have a crazy initial bite, also actually have an annoyingly high initial bite, but you had to put like 10% more pedal pressure in it, and that's what these feel like. Like I just had to push a hair harder. I could get the same amount of bite, I just had to push a little harder. Now there's other brands that I've used in the past that I could get the car to stop, but I felt like I had to put my foot through the floor. And some people love that because, maybe they have a car that they need to stay balanced a little more, a rear wheel drive car or something like that if they had that crazy amount of initial bite, it might loop the car. But for me, that didn't work. I'm a big fan of massive amounts of initial bite. But yeah, that's why you hear me say, like, it feels like this, but I have to do this. You know what I mean? You'll hear that out of other drivers too. And when they're talking about whatever brake pad they like, I would, if you're talking to somebody about brakes, and I recommend everybody before you purchase pads, okay, especially when you're talking track pads or even street pads or whatever, find out what else they have driven on to compare it to. Because if they can't compare it to anything, they're just like, these are great, how do they know?
Oh, yeah, that's a completely valid point. I don't know. You said you can't just throw $400 at pads to find something you like. Luckily, I've had that luxury. With testing on my Corvette, I don't even know how many compounds I've put on there, just trying to feel. And they all have their ups and downs, right? I mean, it's completely subjective, and it's really useful if someone has a baseline like that question, PFC01. That's
you got something to base it off of, and that's the PFC01 was easy for me because before I stole those PFC01s from him, I was running a Hawk DTC 60, and they were almost down to the backing plates, and I needed something right now. So he had a set, and it hooked me up. And before that, I ran a couple other brands, but it's these are really good baselines to kind of give you an idea. But I recommend you do try as many other pads as you can, if you can, to find what works for you. But it's going to help you narrow down what you like about your car, maybe even what you want to change.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If you don't have to worry about brakes and you find something you're happy with, you can finally move on to other things, because not having brakes that you're comfortable with is very concerning.
Yeah. Yep. So one of the big misconceptions, this is another good one I want to get into. Brakes are for slowing your car down only.
Well, that's not true. They're for setting the nose. They're all about controlling the balance of your car, right? So there's a lot more, and that's where we go back into the initial bite and how the pedal feels and things like that. And I mean, you start to understeer a little bit. You have to be able to modulate the pedal enough that you can get some more weight to the front. I mean, it's all weight transfer, right? Throttle and brake.
So what I like to tell people about this is a good set of brakes means you can be on the accelerator longer.
Yeah.
Like it is a good set of brakes is a power mod.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yep.
I mean, if you can brake it at 300 versus 400, that's huge. And
that's massive.
I mean, that's also, and you move on over to wheel to wheel. That's a pass or not a pass, right?
Not only is that a pass or not a pass, but now let's take it one step further. Now let's say you can brake at the 300 instead of the 4, okay, because you got a good set of pads on there. But what if you're able to do that in such a controlled manner that you are now able to turn in a little bit earlier, or maybe even turn in a little bit later to late apex, but you have more control going in and you're able to maintain more speed through the corner because you're not either over braking or upsetting the car more than you would want to.
Yeah, 100%. So
this is one of those things that, I'm kind of putting words in your mouth here, but brakes there's so much more than stopping when it comes to brakes. There's so much more than stopping when it comes to brakes, and they open up so much more for you than you realize, especially on track. On the street, for your daily, you're going to want a safer pad, having some good bite, being able to stop, hold a decent amount of heat if you're going down hills and things like that. Totally understand your tow vehicle. But when you're on track, brakes are, there's more to just stopping fast to finding time with a set of brakes.
And a lot of it is, confidence too, knowing that the brakes are. So if you want to do a third hot lap that you don't usually need to do, you need to be able to rely on the brakes to be there, right?
Yep. And it comes down to, like Drew just said, it's a reliability situation too. I mean, to win, you first must finish. And if you can't do a full lap without, the pads going way out of temp and fading like hell or glazing over. So here's a good question. Let's get into that then. Brake fade. What is brake fade? And we kind of went over that a little bit, but what is brake fade actually? And then what is glazing a pad?
So brake fade would be when you still have a pedal, and it's firm, but your stopping power went way down. And that's that we were talking about before with the off gassing, where that resin's cooking off and you're getting a vapor barrier essentially in between the pad and the rotor. And it's, on a very small scale, it's not touching the rotor anymore. It's pushing the gas. So that's, whenever someone says fade, that's typically what it is. Glazing is you actually went so far past or too rapidly reached the temperature threshold of what that resin can take, that glue, that it turns it's called carburizing. So the resins, you go super in depth with this. The resins are made out of something that wants to turn into carbon, essentially, and carbon is very hard. You think of tungsten carbide and all your tools and stuff like that.
Yep.
And when that happens, it's a surface that can no longer really dig into the rotor. It's kind of just sealed up. And that's where it is beneficial to have those slotted rotors. It comes back in, it'll actually try to cleave that off and machine it. So glazing is kind of, you can think of it as like a smearing of the material. A lot of time you'll look at it and it kind of looks like it has a, I don't know, emo hair do. It's like smeared over itself.
Looks like a comb over.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the resin this got completely cooked and just smeared over itself, and now it's just very hard and you have to get it back off. That's why a lot of times, you can do a couple more cooler laps and it comes back. That glaze removes.
Sure. Here's a couple of, this is actually two questions, but Mr. D. Alex Butler, the, I guess, owner of Track Subies, great dude. How important to a weekender, so like a weekend, HPDE guy, is rotor temperature? Is laser temp reading better than the temp strips on the rotor hat?
Rotor temperature is very important because it's probably one of the easiest things for you to collect. Pad temperature is difficult. A good rule of thumb is that your pads, at least right below the surface, the interface temperature is way hotter, is probably, let's see, to the percent of that, 15% or so lower, or the rotor is 15% lower than what your pads are actually seeing. So it's one of the only things that you can easily collect that gives you an idea of if you're in the operating range of your pads. Laser temp reading, it's a good method if you don't have access to temp paint or strips, but I mean, you know how fast this stuff cools. By the time you get in and hop out, I mean, even in autocross, this stuff drops quick.
Well, I mean, even by the time, if you have somebody waiting for you in the pits, you just cruising down the pits at like a lower speed, or maybe your cooldown lap, like your cooldown lap could be enough to, cool a bunch of stuff off. And autocross is another good example, unless you have somebody like, You slammed on the brakes at the last second. The guy's sitting there with a laser thermometer, literally zapping it as you slammed on the brakes right at the very last second. You're probably going to get a tweaked reading.
Yeah, and I mean, with the weekender, the rotor temperature is huge because you go much past that 1200 degrees Fahrenheit mark, you're going to be looking at new rotor soon. You're actually changing the chemistry of the surface of the rotor. So it's paint strips.
Yep. Paint strips will show max rotor temperature versus paint, or strips will show the max rotor temperature versus laser reading. It's kind of what he's getting at.
Yeah.
So, so when people are asking like, what are these strips or whatever, you can actually pick up these stickers essentially that you can stick on things, and they will tell you what the max temperature is. Like it'll change color up to a certain point. There's also paint you can put on that'll do the same thing, that will change color at a certain temperature, so if you at least went past that.
You're making me a salesman thing. We actually sell that. It's like a little track kit that you get, and it gives you stickers that go on the caliper to tell you what your caliper's at, rotor paint. I think that's the two things.
I expect one of those kits at my house before Laguna.
Yeah, I'm shocked I haven't sent you one yet.
I don't have one. I would love to play around with that. We've ordered those before and messed around with them, but I got to be real, I don't think I've gotten you enough data. So I'll take that.
Like I said, it's subjective. So you have to add this data in a way.
Yep, and data's everything. So let's try to get some data.
For sure.
Tire and brake temperature sensors can fit tire and brake. What are you saying, Josh? I don't even know what you're saying. All right, so he's just talking things. Stop with the things.
Yeah, you can. A lot of IMSA cars and stuff run it. It's just not a.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely not a weekender thing. Hell, it's really not even a tire or a time attack thing. Like that's expensive shit. Install sensors to read temperatures. Yeah, that's cool, man. We don't all have Josh Aldrich money.
There you go.
Right? Holy crap.
Round of sensors.
Well, speaking of big money and people losing their damn minds, so I heard you guys, I heard a rumor, I'm actually holding it in my hand right now, that you guys released some titanium shims for your racing brakes. And one of the questions I keep getting is, why did you guys drill a bunch of holes in them? Let's because I'm not gonna lie, it looks a little different. This is not usually when you look at a titanium shim, they're solid.
Well, there's a reason behind the madness. So this shim tech kind of technology in stainless and things like that has been used for decades in motorcycle brakes. So a lot of people probably know EBC from doing motorcycle brakes. So when we thought about making shims, we're like, well, let's see if this technology transfers over, and we actually put it on dynamometers to measure the differences. And the holes are essentially just interrupting the contact of the piston to the back plate. And with doing that, any type of non-contact you can get between the piston and the pad is huge. Heat does not want to transfer through the air as easily as it does some kind of medium like metal. I mean, go put your hand in your oven, then touch the side of the oven. Huge difference.
Yeah.
So that was the theory behind it. So we went and, put it on the dyno, and we did see a big difference in drop. And this is not uncommon. I mean, a lot of your calipers, your high-end race calipers, look at the surface of it. We call it castellated. It'll be, the top of a rook in chess. That little
that's what the top of the piston itself will look like. Is it'll have, like you said, it'll look like a rook from chess. It'll have like the top of a castle kind of look to it. So there's just less surface itself touching.
Yeah, so we're doing that on the shim, and it does help immensely. And the reason there's so many is because everyone's caliper wants to put the pistons in different ways. There's different mythologies for everything. They're different sizes. This way, you have a very high chance of the piston actually getting interrupted. If we were to just do, a little grid or something somewhere, there's a chance that someone's piston would fall off of that, grid, and then it'd be a moot point. And they're not drilled. It's not that time consuming. They're actually laser cut. So.
Yeah, Dylan's like, they were hole punched. Yep, tell me, you find me a hole punch that's just gonna pop out titanium.
Yeah, probably wear pretty quickly. And I know there's people's concern with compressing it down and fatiguing it, but when you do the math on it, the compressive strength of titanium is more than enough to hold, without collapsing under.
Well, it's also going right up against a backing plate. It's not like it's
supported.
Yeah, it's supported. Like that of all the arguments that I saw in there, that one made no sense to me at all. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but my wall just exploded last night on my Facebook when I showed these things. And there was a lot of people like immediately mad before they thought about it. It's really crazy. And there was just no reason for it. I'm excited to try these out. Do I need these? No, I don't think I need these at all. I am interested, and I don't think I'm going to run them until I get that kit from you, because then I can get data.
Sure.
I would like to see if I maybe can get some data from it. So it might be something that maybe it might be able to tune temps a little bit for me, depending on the track that I'm on.
Yeah, for sure. And, some people say they're a Band-Aid, but I don't know why everyone hates Band-Aids. They heal things, but we've seen people that they had issues. They were thinking about going to a big brake kit. You put these in and it gets you through a full day, and that's all you needed. What's wrong with that? That's
where I'm at, and not everybody can drop. Like, I got to be real. We'll just go straight to this because this actually directly affects people who are in here, who are driving STIs and stuff like this. STI Brembos are not great, especially for the amount of how heavy the car is and how fast you can actually go with an STI. At stock power levels or stage 2 stuff, not a big deal. The second you put any sort of aftermarket turbo on these cars, you're talking 400 plus wheel. They're flying. Okay. You're going 911 turbo speeds with brakes that are significantly smaller, and your car weighs more, and it's way less balanced with a lot less tire. Okay. So you're putting a lot of heat into these brakes, and a set of titanium shims allowed me to finish a season out. Not everybody has $6,000-$7,000 to go dump into a brake kit, and if that would be great if we all did, but they don't. And I would rather see people get to the track, and I don't think it's unsafe in any way. I think it's I think it's a solid way to tune a situation, even if it is a Band-Aid. I think people being angry about Band-Aids I think that's asinine in its own right. Like, don't get me wrong, if you're trying to do a full race program, is titanium shim, the end all be all of answers? Maybe not, but if you can finish the race weekend or turn a lap time or whatever you need to do with it, if the titanium shim was the thing that got you there, if it works, it ain't wrong.
Yeah, and it's not like it's not used in high-end racing. I don't know if you're familiar with like the SCCA GT cars. They're GT2 that we've tested on, it's 500 horsepower, 3,000 pounds, and they have to run like NASCAR. The old NASCAR wheels are 15-inch diameter wheels. So they have these teeny little, usually Willwood or something, 4-pot brakes, and that's all they're regulated to. So shims go a long way in that, because you're regulated by rules. There's nothing else you can do if you're getting fluid boil or
what if your rule situation regulates you to a 15-inch wheel or something? You know what I mean? Yeah. You can't put shit for a rotor in there, so you're not able to have that amount of clamping force. So you're running some freakishly aggressive pad on some super fat rotor, and whatever. You're regulated to these things, and you sticking a shim in there is going to help you slow this car down. Not everybody has like wide open rule sets. You got to do what you got to do, and I think it's fantastic. It's the very cheap and effective way of tuning for what works. You know what I mean? Just I was so astounded with how many people got angry about that. And not everybody is building Looney Tunes Time Attack cars. Or on the flip side of this, and I know I'm just ranting right now, but I was pissed. Not everybody wants to put a $8,000 brake kit on their daily driver that they took to the track, that they're playing around at the track a little bit, might see 3 track days a year, but maybe one of them's Road America and they're cooking some brakes, and they want to have something with a rubber, dust boot in there. And they don't want some hardcore full blast race setup that isn't going to work very well for street use. Finding street pads for full race calipers is hell, but finding, a good race pad for like a basic Brembo isn't. So I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Because Brembo's making the same compromise when they're doing that. You can't have a full, that's one of the, it's called downsides, the big brake kits. A lot of times they're not tuned again for harmonics. They might make noise where the stock one didn't, because you've got such a long pad now. It has different harmonics than the stock stuff, and Brembo's trying to meet a price point. And so if you don't want to switch to a big brake kit on your car that you still drive on the street, even if you have the money to do it and you don't want the squeal, they're, again, a good solution.
Yeah, I think it's great. And again, it's a really simple thing. It's basically just putting a barrier between your pad and your caliper, but it's as simple as it is. It's effective. Like I said, I ran with shims for a couple of years in my 05 STI. I wanted to put the money, instead of getting a really expensive kit for my street car. I was building a street mod car at that time. I wanted to make sure resources went towards that, and this was doing the job.
Sure.
It was doing the job. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
And I've got Eric down here asking any decent brake kits for us who still want to run a 17-inch wheel. Eric looks like he runs a GD chassis car of some sort. Honestly, OEM Brembos you can actually do a decent amount with if you were to. We just had a conversation about titanium shims. You do a good pad. You may want to run a titanium shim. It'll depend on how heavy the car is, how much power it makes. And put a good rotor behind it. I need EBC to maybe start looking into their Apollo kits for STIs, but that's they make a really great BRZ kit. We stuck that on my buddy Jeremy's car, but the still lacking on the GD, GC, even VA, GR stuff. So
Yeah, that's in the works.
I'll just keep pushing. Sooner or later, everything I've said has been basically true, and I think they're starting to realize that now. So we're getting there. It's working with you guys has been great this year, though. I love hanging out with you guys. So I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any questions you guys got. We want to hear them. I don't know if there's too much more I can explain on that one, Eric, because there's not a ton of aftermarket kits that don't require you to go to an 18. And if you're going to spend the money, like if you got the money for a brake kit, you got the money for a set of 18-inch wheels. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm currently running 4-pot with EBC blue stuff and rotors, but we're cooking them really fast on track. Maybe you should be looking in a set of these the SRs. But if you're talking, are you talking Brembo 4-pots or are you talking the Subaru small red 4-pots? Because those Subaru small red 4-pots, they're not designed to slow down a full blast GD chassis. And exactly what Drew said, 17-inch tire options stink anyway. I totally agree.
Yeah, I would start looking at the RP pads or the SR pads.
Yep.
If you're cooking the blue stuff, that's the thing with finding your temperature range. You might have to, find the sweet spot for your vehicle.
The majority of these guys, I'd probably tell go straight to the SR just due to the way we almost all of us have ABS. They're not really lightweight cars, and the SR stuff has been great. I'm a little hit or miss on the RP, not gonna lie. I think it's right for the right car. It's right for the right car.
Sure. Yeah, just like anything. Like we said, the Miatas can run 3 pads. It depends on your vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah, I really enjoy running the SR. One of the things that I like about it on my car is there's no bed in. I don't know if I'm sure you've probably noticed that, but there's no special thing you have to do to it. You go do a couple laps at 80%, and because they don't have any of those chemicals in them, you're good to go. I've wasted whole track days trying to bed in pads. It's frustrating.
I've had pads that it's taken entire events for them to start feeling correct.
Yeah, isn't that great?
No, it's the fucking worst because I'm the dumbass who likes to fix things or try out new stuff at competition events because I'm dumb. So that's under competition situations. I'm trying to get brakes to feel correct. And I think that was one thing I had issues with other brands that I tried. That I think some of it was I wasn't able to, break them in correctly, bed them correctly, because of the way I was having to use them.
Sure.
So I had lots of situations with brands where I'd have to pull the pad off because I glazed them. And then I'd have to scrape them on the parking lot, like find some gritty parking lot, like concrete, and scrape them down so I could get the surface off of them, shove them back in, and try to get them to come back. Like it's I've been there.
Oh my god.
Yep. Good times. So yeah, I don't know. We're open to more questions, but I think we hit on a lot of the stuff I wanted to hit on. A lot of it was just misconceptions on, not everybody a big ass rotor or a big ass caliper is the right answer. Is there any downside other than surface area? Or is there any upside other than surface area can you overbrake a car? Let's put it that way.
Sure, they'd be doing the same thing as you did with coefficient. It would
Yep.
could get a little unstable, things like that.
Sure.
But that's again comes down to coefficient. Yeah, you want essentially the biggest brake system you can fit in there reasonably, because that's going to help with wear. But then again, if it's too big, you don't get the temperature enough. So yeah, you can definitely. There's a diminishing returns.
So that's a great one. Other Dewey asks, is brake knock common for a street car going to the track? I have a few very Subaru centric answers to this one, but I mean, if you've got anything to add, I'm gonna meander on the Subaru side of this.
Are we referring to like knockback or like what?
I'm assuming brake knockback is what he's talking about.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's very common. They're not designed to retract at the temperatures, and
so
go ahead.
I'm just gonna wander in this if you got anything to add, because one thing I'll tell you is the 5x100 knuckle, so older WRX knuckles, GCs, things like that. The wheel bearing kind of sucks. Okay, yeah. and that's one of the big reasons the 5x114 happened. You're on an 07 STI, so you're a 5x114, but the 04 STI guys had some serious issues with Brembos. They'd go around some longer corners, okay, longer high-speed corners with some grippy tires, and what they would do is they'd push the piston into the caliper because the everything would flex, so the rotor would just push it in. And then you'd go into the next high-speed braking zone, and you would have no brakes. You'd have to like triple, quadruple pump your brakes to get them to come back. That was really common. Now, BRZs don't really have that option. Issue. It's a whole different setup. But I can tell you, WRXs and the 04 STIs, that was a serious issue, and I've experienced that firsthand multiple times. One thing I've heard of people attempting, and I don't know if this is true or not, Preston, you might know something about this, people putting springs behind the piston. Is that a thing? Okay.
Yeah, that's common in real high-end calipers, too. We have a very expensive caliper that we run on the dyno from another company. And yeah, they've got little springs that are stuck into the piston to keep the pads forward.
Makes sense.
And yeah, we have the same problem. I know it's Subarus, but Corvettes have the same thing. There's not enough webbing on the knuckle, too. So it
flexes.
The wheel bearing deflects, and you end up with a bunch of knockback. Super common. And to Robert's point, sliders are going to have a hell of a time trying to operate how they're supposed to at probably double the temperature they were designed for.
Yeah. Yep. So if you're on that's another extremely big reason to upgrade to a it'd be like considered a monoblock caliper or something like that, something Brembo-esque. Just due to the fact that you're gonna have pistons coming in from both sides, and it's gonna the heat's going to be distributed a little more evenly, but it's also going to those sliders, like he just said, you're gonna bake those things. You're gonna bake those things to no end. They were not designed for that shit.
No, they're gonna seize.
Yep. So, there's another good one since we're talking about brakes. I get this every once in a while. We were talking about leading and trailing pistons, and a lot of people don't realize that there is a difference, and it's definitely in OEM cars you see this. For you to put a STI caliper on a BRZ that wasn't designed for it, so an STI, an Impreza-based STI caliper on a BRZ, they have to flip sides because the caliper's kind of the knuckle's kind of inverted. Ooh. Okay, and what ends up happening is the what normally would be the leading piston now is in the back, and the trailing piston is in the front. And how god awful dangerous could that be?
Not necessarily dangerous. You're just going to get a lot of pad taper. You're probably going to wear faster than you could. I mean, I've seen people in situations like that. The pad tapers so much that they'll take the pads out and flip the sides that they're on. Yeah. To try to get them to wear more evenly. But that's probably what you're going to end up with. Is just a lot of taper.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah,
Can we just not do that and buy brakes that are designed for the car? Please, thank you. I like that question. I guess new brakes. Yes, new brakes.
For sure.
So I think this was fun, man. I think we had a good chat here. I mean, what I don't want to do is have people blowing you up. I'm supposed to be a representative of EBC, so if you have questions, you can ask me about it. But I mean, if people were to try to dig up some EBC stuff, I mean, where would they go?
To buy pads?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Perfectbrakes.com is a good one. If you're a shop, Turn 14 carries everything.
Yep.
But typically, perfectbrakes.com is the best idea of what's in stock, what's available. It has everything listed on there. That's usually the way to go. Or just call EBC Vegas. Someone will answer the phone and talk to you about what you need. And
yeah, you've got that option. You can always hit me up. That's why I'm here too. I do sell EBC, but if you're getting into outside of Subaru realms, or you want to get, you want to get a more data-oriented situation, suggestions, and they want to hear a little more about it, you may want to call them directly. So it might be something you want to look into. Yeah,
there's even a race technical email. If you've got something that's a little more technical, you can send it to that, and that goes to me and a couple other guys, and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it. We've blown them up with all sorts of wild questions. And so if we do get some time attackers in here, Josh, one of these days his car will be running and be terrifying. And then you've got Drew, who's been doing high level autocross for years. If some of you guys do have some little more hardcore technical questions, you may want to hit them up. So I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us today, dude. I'm probably going to end up dragging your ass back on here again, but this was a lot of fun. And I hope we, covered something that helps you in some way. You know what I mean?
Talk about it. I appreciate you guys having me on here.
No, anytime, dude. So sounds like you're not going to be at Heartland, right?
No, I will not.
Okay, but you are going to come out to Laguna.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so I mean, if you guys want to see Preston in person, come out to Laguna, and you can come out and do pirate stuff. He's going to be out there doing pirate stuff with us. As far as Boogie and IAG stuff, we will be at Heartland this weekend. So wish us luck. We're going to try to sew up the championship this weekend, guys, and we're really stoked about it. That's where we got Dylan in the chat right now. Dylan is driving through the middle of the Midwest in the middle of the nowhere flyover states right now, dragging Boogie towards Heartland in Kansas. So he's on his way. He's in Indiana, so he is about to take a nap behind the wheel. Ain't nothing going on there, let's be real.
Yeah, a lot of cornfields.
A lot of cornfields, especially where he's at, because he's coming through the middle of Ohio, so it's pretty much through the middle of Indiana. Yep, that'll be a fun one. And then once he crosses over Indiana, he's going to be in the middle of Illinois, bottom side. So it's more corn. Have fun with that, Dylan. So that's what's going on, guys. It's been real. It's been fun. Oh, we are finally, the recorded versions of these are on Spotify. We're going to try to add them to Google Podcasts and Apple, but the recorded versions are on Spotify now. So the last 3 episodes, and this one will go up in about 20 minutes after we get done here. Go check them out if you want to catch up, but share that, and drop us a review. Tell me how bad we are or how good we are or whatever, what you want to hear more of. But share that link, get it to more people, and try to get more people in here on the live cast, and then we get more questions. And the more questions we get, the more we all learn. And that's how this works. So this was fun. We're going to need to do this again, Preston. And thank you so much for coming on here.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime. A lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, dude. And yep, I will. I guess I'll see you at Laguna.
Yeah, and I'll watch you at Heartland. Good luck.
All right. Thanks, buddy. See ya.
Bye.